Hey guys, welcome back to Required Reading. It's Russ with you again. We're starting out a new book today. Thought we would finish out the series with Gremlins. So this is going to be Gremlins 2, The New Batch, the novelization that was written by David Bishop, obviously based on the motion picture that was written by Charlie Haas, and the characters created by Chris Columbus. So this is chapter 1. It didn't smell like stir-fried cooking or exotic spices tonight in New York City's famous Chinatown. No, it smelled like money. Or that's the way it smelled to Frank Forster as he opened the door of the black limo that stretched halfway down the street. The hum of neon from restaurant signs, the slap of taxis splashing through puddles, the smell of fresh fish on ice in an open-air market swept into the limo's plush interior. Yeah, money. Forrester's shiny black Oxford shoe avoided a pile of doggy business and orange rind, instinctively finding its way to safe purchase on the sidewalk. He stepped out, drinking deep of the money in the air. Clamp was right, Forster thought, as he beckoned for his flunkies to hurry up, chop chop, with the gear. If the prime rule of real estate was location, 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 then these blocks sure fit the bill. A hop and a half step from New York's city, state, and federal government offices, a stone's throw from Wall Street, and dead on the Manhattan Bridge's gate to Brooklyn, the area was a developer's dream. His gaze swept the area. He saw lots of dilapidated old buildings, many with going out of business signs pasted in their boarded up windows, all bought up by Mr. Clamp, all except one. Forrester looked dead ahead. A sign reading simply Curiosities hung at an angle, and soft light hinting of home and pipe smoke and incense seeped through colored bead curtains. It was the domicile of a certain Mr. Wing, the only holdout to the ever-growing grip of Clamp Incorporated. This was the place, all right. Impatiently, Forrester snapped his fingers twice at the already bustling suited men who popped open the trunk of the limo and pulled out a 25-inch television monitor and a digital VCR. Frank Forrester was a sour-faced man with short corporate hair, a top-of-the-line gray Brooks Brother business suit, and a bright red power tie. Frank Forrester got things done. Frank Forrester was the fax generation corporate man. Frank Forrester got things done yesterday. This was why he was Daniel Clamp's second in command. What that really meant was that he was Clamp Industries' Hatchet Man. The entourage trooped down the steps. The lead man, a former Jets linebacker with shoulders big as the Statue of Liberty's, pushed through the door, ringing an announcement bell. The TV-toting duo and Forrester followed into the shop. The place was a real mess. Dilapidated junk store with a stuffed monkey hanging from the ceiling, old vellum blocks crammed on shelves, wicker cages scattered about, and a pleasant but ancient smell, as though it had been there even before the Dutch had bought this island for a handful of costume jewelry. Yeah, maybe this was the hole where they stored those famous $24 worth of beads. It felt ancient. Lingering in the atmosphere were faint musical notes, like the afterthought of a beautiful, simple melody just ended. It put goosebumps on Forrester's generally cold skin. He shook off the shivers and attended to business. The proprietor, Mr. Wing, sat in an easy chair fronting an exotically woven rug, looking like a reject from a kung fu movie. He was old, and he was Chinese, with Fu Manchu chin whiskers and a robe. Aromatic tobacco fumes wafted from a pipe that he was smoking. As henchmen set up the audio-visual equipment, the boss addressed the shop owner. "Mr. Wing?" The old man nodded politely. his rheumy old eyes sparkling as though in candlelight. "Daniel Clamp would like to speak with you." Snap of fingers. Snap of controls. Tape word static flashed momentarily onto the wide screen, giving way to an abrupt high-definition image of a young-looking businessman, exuding phosphor dot enthusiasm and self-confidence. Mr. Wing watched with barely a note of surprise, as though this kind of thing happened all the time. "Good morning, Mr. Wing. Let's cut through to the key issues, okay? I'm prepared to increase my offer substantially." The photogenic image of Daniel Clamp was a face known round the world, the very portrait of modern American enterprise. It was a young-looking 40, with lights dancing in the eyes and a genuine homespun cast to the well-groomed features. A greedy Jimmy Stewart. "Now, Mr. Wing," the tape-recorded stereo voice intoned, "you're attached to your business. I appreciate that. I'm attached to my own business. I develop the biggest buildings in New York, and you sell, Clamp's corn-fed blue eyes glanced around as though they could see the knickknacks populating the shop. "Little things. Fine, but I'm not just talking about money here." The camera pulled back, revealing an easel beside Daniel Clamp. Propped upon the easel was an architect's rendering of a grandiose lobby in a huge office building. "Take a look, Mr. Wing," said the button-down tycoon, tapping the picture with a gold ballpoint pen. "The Clamp Chinatown Center, where business gets oriented. When I put up a building, it's the biggest, it's the newest, it's the best. People are going to be killing each other to get into this building." Forrester stared. There was some kind of twittering sound coming from one of the wicker cages over there. Cripes, it sounded like TV. Kind of eerie, but not threatening. A rat? No, more of a mouse sound. Forrester just ignored it, shrugging his jacket into properly squared shape and straightening his Saks Fifth Avenue tie. "Now, we've been able to reach an understanding with everyone on the block except for you. Let me show you what I'm willing to do for you." The gold pin ball pointed. "A newsstand and souvenir concession, right here under the atrium. The foot traffic through here is going to make the Pan Am building look like a ghost town." That should hook the old geek, thought Forrester. But when he looked back over, he saw that Mr. Wing was just sitting there, regarding Clamp's image as impassively as he might stare at a boring game of mahjong. "Please let us know when you've made a decision, Mr. Wing," continued Clamp, flashing his self-assured smile. "You know, I believe that there's always an area of agreement that two people can reach." The picture of Clamp dissolved to the Clamp corporate logo, a stylized C hanging like a vice grip next to the earth. The vice tightened, clamping down upon the earth. Mr. Wing nodded. "Yes," he said sagely, as though all the wisdom of mankind resided behind that noble forehead. "A man can always agree with others. It is more difficult to agree with oneself." Forrester blinked. "Does that mean you—" The old Chinaman coughed. It was a hacking, deep, almost tubercular cough. It sounded terribly unhealthy. The coughing subsided, and Mr. Wing answered with the utmost dignity and gentleness. "I'm so sorry. Please tell Mr. Clamp that the answer is no." "Damn!" A flicker of anger twitched on Forrester's face, but he was never one to allow his emotions, such as they were, to get in the way of the rapid execution of business. There were other places to be, other things to do, other business to be busy with. He snapped around in an abrupt about-face and hurled a final sentence over his shoulder as he marched out of the door. "Keep the TV." His time was a hell of a lot more valuable than the effort it would take to lug that thing around. He snapped his fingers, and his assistant, henchman, bodyguards fell in line behind him. They left Mr. Wing's Chinese curiosity shop in a single file. Back in the limo, the chauffeur drove off and merged into the general bustling traffic of Mott Street. "Well, I'm sorry that didn't work out, sir," said the former linebacker in a voice with so much bottom it seemed to well up from the plush floor. "I thought he'd like the TV." The frown on Forrester's face was bending up into a smug smile. He was thinking back. Forrester liked what he was seeing on the instant replay in his head. "Did you hear that cough?" Forrester pulled out a bottle of Evian mineral water from the portable refrigerator and poured himself a glass. "That guy must be at least 80, maybe 90 years old." He savored the cold, clear water. "We can wait. Mr. Wing's yin, I'm afraid, is not long for this yang." The limo turned onto Mulberry Street and cruised past the cappuccino bars and spaghetti mills of Little Italy. They passed Umberto's Clam House, the place where Joey Gallo had bought the Linguini farm, and Frank Forrester, for all of his arrogance, shivered slightly. Thank God Mr. Clamp hadn't tried to buy this block out. In Mr. Wing's curiosity shop, static hissed on the 25-inch Zenith high-definition stereo television set. From a nearby wicker cage, a furry paw reached out and grabbed the control knob. Gizmo the Mogwai changed the channels, chirping his song of content. "Oh boy, a new toy!" The Technicolor picture exploded on the screen and almost knocked the furry little creature back on his duffus. There was a big, brawny guy clutching what the human creatures called a bow and arrow in his muscled arms. He looked like Paul McCartney on steroids. Atop dark Italian pretty boy features perched a rag tied around his forehead as a sweatband. Sylvester Stallone in a Rambo movie. "To survive war," the Prince of Pecs intoned in his unmistakable Flatbush nasal voice, "you gotta become war." Gee, gosh! What was that guy doing? What was he putting on the end of that arrow? He was screwing a metal arrowhead on the tip. He drew the bow back and fired up into the air. The picture changed to a Russian helicopter hanging in the air. The arrow connected with the metal underside of the aerial beast, and kablam! The chopper blew up, bursting into flame in 1,000 pieces, littering the jungle below. Gizmo's eyes went wide. His arms windmilled with excitement and alarm. So much color, so much action! It reminded him of the light and lava falls of the home world of the Mogturman, the inventors of the Mogwai. "Neat!" he piped in his distinctive little voice. Mr. Wing strode up forcefully and clicked off the set. He wheeled around to face Gizmo, shaking a withered finger. "Television again. Aye! Ah, an invention for fools. Do you not remember the trouble wreaked by the idiots who watch it?" Gizmo grinned sheepishly and grinned innocently. What Mr. Wing was talking about was that terrible debacle a few years back in Kingston Falls, way upstate. That was when the traveling salesman and part-time inventor Rand Peltzer bought Gizmo the Mogwai and brought him home as a Christmas present for his son Billy. Gizmo the Mogwai purred at the very thought of his friend Billy Peltzer. What a nice young human. And his girlfriend Kate Barringer, so pretty and cuddly. Nice folks. He just felt so bad about what had happened, because the humans had made a terrible mistake. Taking care of Mogwai bears with it grave responsibility. There were 3 rules. Do not expose them to light. Do not get them wet. Do not feed them after midnight. Light hurt Mogwais. That had been no problem with the Peltzers. However, they had let Gizmo get wet. When mogwais get wet, they reproduce. This, in itself, was not bad. You just got more mogwai, perhaps a little more mischievous than Gizmo. However, up in Kingston Falls, those mischievous little new mogwai that had popped off Gizmo got into some serious snacking after midnight. They had become gremlins, and then all heck had broken loose. Gizmo shivered at the very thought. His little mouth bent sadly into the most forlorn frown. "Don't you remember? I had to come and take you away. Those small-town fools. They almost ruined their own homes. They almost destroyed their own planet. They did not have the wisdom and the fortitude to take the responsibility." The ancient Mr. Wing broke into a series of the most awful coughs that Gizmo had heard yet. He bent over double, racked with spasms and hacking coughs. The Mogwai's little heart almost broke to see his beloved Mr. Wing hurting so. If there was only something he could do. "I am not feeling so well," said Mr. Wing, turning away. "I shall go and have some green tea, and then I shall take a nap. Please, little one, do not get into trouble." The unwell little man shuffled off into a dim corner of his shop. Gizmo the Mogwai sang sadly. His beloved Mr. Wing was sick. Gizmo would do anything, anything to make him better. But what could a poor Mogwai do? The little creature began singing a gayer song. Maybe a nice tune would heal Mr. Wing's spirit, if not his body. And it was a person's spirit, of course, thought Gizmo. That really mattered. The beautiful song filled the curiosity shop like sweet perfume. Chapter 2. Inside the Clamp Center, world headquarters of the Clamp Corporation, were hundreds of offices and stores and suites, the usual array of services for big business. However, the Clamp Center distinguished itself from other office skyscrapers by including a good deal more than most others. What other office centers, after all, sported chiropractors, cheek to backbone, with fortune tellers? What other skyscrapers housed the Flat Earth Society right next to a Flying Saucer Society? For it was Daniel Clamp's policy, if you had the bucks, and they were big enough, you were more than welcome to rent space in the Cadillac of modern architecture. Clamp would have preferred Rolls-Royce, but he decided that it would be politic to keep things, at least on the surface, American. Another of the things the Clamp Center had that most other office buildings lacked was a whole floor of television and radio studios, which produced and broadcast programs for the Clamp Cable Network. In one of the tape editing rooms of the Clamp Cable Network, a producer named Max Schneider watched the playback of one of the day's news stories, a piece on the death of a certain honorable Asian gentleman recently deceased. "Mr. Wing's death removes the last obstacle to developer Daniel Clamp's long-delayed Chinatown project." "Okay," said the producer to the editor. "Switch over to the boss." The editor made the appropriate adjustments to the bank of shiny knobs, and an image swept across the bank of monitors. "It is obviously a sad occasion," said the pre-recorded image of Daniel Clamp. His jaw stuck out bravely, and the suggestion of tears of grief glimmered in his eyes. "But the bright side is that we can go ahead with something that will mean a great deal to the community down there." Max Schneider turned down his audio. He'd heard the spiel before, and besides, he was pretty sick of Clamp's Henry Fonda meets Godzilla voice. He turned to see Phil Marcus, the reporter who had done the location shoot in Chinatown, enter the editing room. "Hey, Mark." "Hey, Phil. Nice piece. I think that the juxtaposition is interesting. Yeah, but I tried not to make it too obvious. Gotta feed the landlord, you know. Cripes, don't I? My West Side duplex rent just got hiked. He sipped at his coffee. The reporter nodded towards the screen, which had just filled with an image of Chinatown. That old guy had some neat stuff in his store. You think they'll auction it off or something? You kidding? The scuttlebutt is that Forrester had the bulldozers poised, just waiting for this moment. As soon as the old man croaked, he was ready for serious demolition. What, just in case Wing decides he's not really dead? Well, let's just say Forrester doesn't take chances. Indeed, that was not far wrong, for even as they spoke, with the camera crews packed and gone, the wrecking ball descended. Unfortunately, a certain little mogwai by the name of Gizmo was still in his wicker cage, still inside Mr. Wing's curiosity shop. Gizmo sighed, and he sang his song again. It was a very sad song now, in minor key, and it was sad because he missed his friend and keeper, Mr. Wing, so much. The little creature was in mourning now. He wore a little black armband around his furry arm, and he was bent over, hugging himself, feeling lost and alone. A tear dripped from one of the mogwai's wide eyes and dripped down to glisten on the tip of his nose. It fell on to one of the wicker threads of his cage. Kaboom! The walls of the shop shuddered as though struck by an earthquake. Plaster rained down. Then a wood support beam fell down and hit the wicker cage, splitting it open. As the whole world seemed to be caving in on him, Gizmo the Mogwai decided that it would be a great idea to get the heck out of there. He raced away from a falling piece of ceiling, jumped over a smashed hookah, dodged an old record player. Behind him, a large metal wrecking ball crashed through the wall, a mighty behemoth of destruction, and it was heading his way. He hopped around and ran for all he was worth. The wrecking ball seemed to be gaining on him, and to the poor diminutive Mogwai, it looked as big as a planet. Yikes! It was just inches away. Gizmo could feel the cushion of air it pushed in front of it, could imagine the cold of that awful metal. At the very last moment possible, the Mogwai leaped away from the flying ball, rolling off to the right and crashing softly into a basket of Indian scarves. More rending and tearing sounded as the ball whacked through the next wall. Instinctively, Gizmo realized that he couldn't hide there. This whole building was coming down around his ears. He had to get out. Quickly, his little legs sped him out through the gaping hole the wrecking ball had provided. He raced out into the alley, huffing and puffing as falling bricks clicked and clacked behind him, raising a cloud of dust. The Mogwai ran and ran, frightened out of his poor little mind, until he finally reached a part of the alley that seemed relatively calm and quiet. He took in a deep breath and sighed. "Hey, Joe! Look what we got here!" Startled, Gizmo wheeled around and looked up. A pair of rough and calloused human hands were reaching down. Gizmo got an impression of a swarthy face with a cigar butt sticking out of its mouth. And then the strong hands grabbed him and held him firm. Billy Peltzer usually didn't hate anything or anybody. He hadn't even hated the late unlamented Mrs. Deagle, who wanted to put his dog Barney to sleep and had ended up as a UFO hurling through the skies above Kingston Falls. No, Billy Peltzer loved animals. He loved sunsets, he loved his mother and his father and his relatives, and most of all, he loved Kate Barringer, his fiancée. But Billy Peltzer hated New York. Where else, though, did an architect/artist have a chance for success? Where else but Manhattan could Kate hope to succeed, really succeed, at the career she had chosen? Editing books. Of course, she hadn't even really gotten into the door of that profession yet, but here in the heart of American publishing, she actually had a chance. True, she was just a tour guide now at the Clamp Building, but hadn't Johnny Carson and Willard Scott started as pages for NBC? Before you knew, Billy was confident that Kate would be first an assistant, then an editor at Clamp Books on the 13th floor of the Clamp Center. Anyway, though, it was difficult thinking about your dreams when you were in the middle of New York City rush hour. Billy Peltzer hated New York City rush hours. "I should be finished by 6 tonight," said Kate Barringer, as they strode through the outright madness of early morning Times Square. "If we go straight from work, we can make the early bird special at the movies." They had just emerged from the Times Square subway station, having rattled in on the number 3 IRT train. They elbowed through a crush of office workers, past vendors, hookers, three-card Monte artists, and the usual effluvia of weird Times Square characters standing outside the theater lobbies of questionable movie houses. It had the trademarked New York day smell about it, that spring thaw smell of roasting chestnuts, concrete, dampness, trash, with just a whiff of various people's cologne or perfume, and the stench of the homeless thrown in for good measure. Billy always walked watching the ground in these kind of areas. You had to watch that you didn't step in something. "It's going to be close," he said. "Maybe we should do it tomorrow." "No, tomorrow's when the Futtermans are coming into town to visit. They really are looking forward to the big city trip." Kate dodged a madly careening businessman, doubtlessly heading for some power breakfast. "Mr. Futterman must be getting better if he can travel." Kate wore a bright blue blazer. Upon the lapel was the Clamp ID badge, a universal barcode stamped on the trademark Big C. It was identical to the one that Billy wore. "Yeah, his wife says he's better. It's just that he was so rattled." "And then the Gremlin siege of Kingston Falls." Kate shook her head, disbelief still in those gorgeous deep brown eyes. "I guess having a bunch of monsters driving a snowplow through your living room could kind of do that to you. He almost got killed." "Right." Billy checked his watch. "We're going to be late. Maybe we better take a cab the rest of the way." Of course, even suburban boy Billy realized that the chance of getting an empty cab in New York rush hour was somewhat the same as the proverbial snowballs in the proverbial hot place. But then why not try? God knew if Marla caught him late again, she'd ream him out and hang him up to dry. And while the notion of the very attractive boss paying physical attention was not terribly displeasing, the actual physical pain involved soon would be. As it happened, a businessman in a trench coat was just getting out of a cab. Billy dashed over and stuck his head into the driver's window to make sure that he got the guy's attention. He was rewarded with a blast of onions and garlic sufficient to knock a bird off a building at 50 feet. "Thanks. Can you wait a second for my girlfriend?" The foreign driver squinted and took his stubby cigar out from under his bushy mustache. "You going to the airport?" "No, the Clamp Center. It won't take long. It's just up Madison, and then—" The driver almost cut off Billy's nose, he rolled the window up so fast. The cab scooted off back into traffic, leaving Billy choking on a plume of exhaust. Kate caught up with him and pulled him back out of the traffic before he got creamed by a car, a bus, or one of those crazy bike messengers screaming past, breaking the sound barrier. "Billy, I don't think we're getting the hang of New York City." Billy just sighed, dazed at the whole thing. They walked the 8 blocks or so to the Clamp Center, and with each step on the filthy concrete, each scabby palm that was stuck in his face demanding spare change, Billy grew more and more depressed. Cripes! Marla was going to kill him! Pretty soon they approached the incredible monument to power and wealth that was the Clamp Center. Even now, Billy Peltzer always got a little frisson when he looked up at the Clamp Center. The monument to late 20th century architecture, to wealth and power. It rose up like a direct plug into the sky vault of God himself. Its freshly scrubbed windows shone and its metal gleamed. At the base was the ultimate sign of status and power, a huge atrium 3 stories high. This was the home not merely of trees, but of the Clamp Center concession mall. A credit card shopper's paradise. This was Daniel Clamp's fancy offering to the goddess of commerce, at whose purse strings he worshipped. But boy, this building was tall. Boy, was it beautifully built. Clamp had gotten the absolute best architects to design it, used only the best materials. It had a status address in a status city. Rumors were that a cleaning lady had once spotted Daniel Clamp in his office at the tippy top of the tower, leaning out the window screaming, "Top of the world, Ma!" Almost at the doors, Billy turned to Kate. "You know, that painting I'm doing now, the big building in Chinatown, it's really driving me nuts." "Why? What's wrong?" "Like yesterday, I had it looking really good, and then my boss told me to take 20 stories off the World Trade Center so our building looks taller." "Wow, that's pretty dishonest." "Yeah, no kidding. I don't think I'm getting the promotion this year." "That's okay. We don't have to wait." "Yeah, we do. It wouldn't feel right getting married on the money I'm making now. It's bad enough that you got me the job." Kate turned on him, hand on hip. Her hair was shorter now, and she looked older, but in a very appealing, very clean and honest way. Billy just always hoped that the city never made her hard and cold. The sweet, naive Kate was so much more appealing. "I didn't get you the job. I just heard about it." "Billy, you can get promoted and stuff if you want to, but you have to act like you deserve it. Let people know you're there." "Yeah," thought Billy, as they approached the revolving doors. Maybe she was right. He was kind of a wallflower in his office. He should probably be more assertive. It was just that he didn't like playing office politics and brown-nosing, like Marla did. "Want to try the revolving doors today?" Kate looked at the supersonic, high-tech doors with extreme suspicion. "I don't know. I had a big breakfast this morning." Even as they stood contemplating the venture, a red-faced executive with a briefcase rudely elbowed past them and dived into the revolving doors. He was promptly spun around as fast as a Tasmanian devil on a hungry day and tossed head over heels back onto the apron in front of them, legs and arms akimbo and tangled up in the spilled papers of his briefcase. "Ah, you're right," said Billy. So they used a regular door, a door marked, "Please use revolving doors," instead. They entered the lobby, and the change was profound. From the New York rush hour hell, they entered a temperature-controlled heaven, a paradise of modern scent and high-tech texture. This ultra-modern, monumental-style lobby included bars, restaurants, a frozen yogurt stand, a beauty parlor, clothing stores, and enough shoe stores to satisfy even Billy Peltzer's mom. Only, of course, all this was all upscale. Chi-chi, posh. A number of the people who walked through this carpeted environment could be recognized instantly as Clamp employees by their barcode ID tags, shaped like big C's, the same as Billy and Kate wore. Kate waved hello to an attractive 30-ish woman leading a tour group. Rubbernecking the lobby and clicking pictures of this monument to the magnificent, Billy recognized her. She was a friend of Kate's, named Doreen, who had the same job as Kate. She wore the same sharp blue uniform as Kate, with a tall hat modeled on the Clamp building sticking up. "Hope you've enjoyed your tour of the world's most modern automated office building. Don't forget copies of Mr. Clamp's best-selling book, I Took Manhattan, are on sale at the newsstand." Kate turned back to Billy. Don't let things get to you. I won't. They kissed, and while Kate's lips were soft and full on his for a moment, he forgot his troubles. It was these times that made all this New York craziness worthwhile. Billy scooted off to catch the next elevator up. Unfortunately, he just missed it. A soothing electronic voice greeted his button push. "Thank you for pushing the elevator button." Oh, great, thought Billy. More time for Marla to stew. Then a man came into the lobby who made Billy Peltzer tense up as tight as, well, tight as a clamp.
Clamp Cable Network now leaves the air. We hope you have enjoyed our programming, but more importantly, we hope you have enjoyed life.